Yes, this will be known as your worst audio podcast, but your, best intended podcast. My name is Jamie Howard. I'm doing my 5th attempt at a podcast with Tom Rowland as he explores new media in his attempt to take over the fishing and outdoor landscape. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
I'm Tom Rowland, and this is the Tom Rowland Podcast. Hey, everybody, and welcome to the podcast today. This is episode 20, and it's with filmmaker and friend Jamie Howard. You guys know Jamie. He produced iconic films in the fishing world, like In Search of the Rising Tide, Chasing Silver, Location X, Andy's Return, Bass, the movie, and most recently, he has spent 4 years chasing the striped bass migration and documented it all on a film called Running the Coast. I worked with Jamie on both Chasing Silver and Location X, and they were two of my favorite projects that I've ever done outside of Saltwater Experience. I love Jamie. We got along great right from the beginning. And, we just had a good time doing those movies and had no idea really at the time how they would turn out. And it was beyond all expectations. Jamie turned out some amazing movies that really made a mark on the fishing world. Today, in talking to him, I learned a whole lot about what it was that got him interested in making films. And with all the time that we had spent together, I had never really asked him, or maybe I just never really understood what the driving force of him really changing his entire life and devoting it to becoming a filmmaker. And today I learned that 9/11 had a big, big impact on Jamie. 9/11 really changed all our lives. But I guess if you were living in New York at the time, it had a particularly profound impact on the people that were living there, obviously. Jamie was working for one of the largest ad agencies in New York and therefore one of the largest ad agencies in the world. Pretty fast-paced life. And after 9/11, he really kind of rethought things and decided to go down this path. And so I kind of explored that with him about what it was. Why wasn't this fishing path? Why not a different path? Really enjoyed the conversation. I think his story is fascinating. I think that it took real guts to make a big change like that. To see him come out the other side as a successful filmmaker and to have really made such an impact on the fishing world it's really awesome. Today's episode takes place on the phone. Jamie and I have tried to get together and either go fishing or get together and sit down and do this podcast. And we've tried it a number of times and have been unsuccessful. We then tried many times to get on the phone and either had poor Wi-Fi or just bad headset, or I just wasn't comfortable with the audio. Finally, we started working it out. And that's why in the beginning of this episode, he jokingly says this will be your worst audio podcast ever. Thanks to my editor and friend Tom Hardy from Podcast Pro, it turned out pretty good. So really happy about that. Tell me what you think. You can email me, as always, podcast@Saltwater Experience. Let me know if you thought the quality was good enough. Anyway, I'm excited about this one, and I hope that you're going to enjoy it as well. And as always, tag me on Instagram and let me know that you're listening. You can tag Howard Films as well. And you can also send me an email at podcast@Saltwater Experience. Lots of you have been lately, and I really appreciate that. You've been giving some great suggestions for future guests, and I have tracked some of those down already. So I hope to have some of your suggestions coming at you in future podcasts. You can also... maybe you'll be a fan of the week, like this week's fan of the week who sent me an email, Max Baumgartner. He says, I became a member of Captains for Clean Water after listening to the podcast and bought my best friend and fisherman, Don Crowley, a membership for his birthday. Planning to try to make some phone calls to my legislature regarding WRDA bill and donate some time. Hope my 2- and 4-year-old boys can enjoy Florida Bay when they grow up. Thanks for helping to bring attention to this pressing issue. No need to thank me. Thank yourself. And thank you to everybody else who has taken action after the podcast with Daniel Andrews and Captains for Clean Water. That issue is in the forefront, and it's really, really important that we all try to do what we can. So thank you, Max, and thanks for being the fan of the week this week. And this week, this episode is brought to you by Waypoint TV. Have you cut your cable? You thinking about it? Lots of people are. Waypoint's a free service that has well over 2,000 episodes of the best outdoor hunting and fishing shows anywhere. It's free, and it's available on Apple TV, Roku, Amazon Fire, smart TVs, your phone, your tablet, your computer, iPad, every other device. Check it out. It's free, and it is awesome. So now, let's get to my discussion with filmmaker and friend, Jamie Howard of Howard Films. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the podcast today. I have with me one of my good friends and longtime friends, somebody that you're probably familiar with because his films are some of the most iconic and interesting films that the fishing world has ever seen, in my opinion. Jamie Howard owns Howard Films, and he has done films such as In Search of a Rising Tide, Chasing Silver, Location X, Andy's Return to Chasing Silver, and also Bass the Movie, and I may even be missing some. But, I am. I'm missing the most recent, and Jamie's here to tell us all about that. Jamie, what's going on? How you doing today?
Yes, sir. Good to be here. Yeah, I think you left out Running the Coast, which
Running
is
the
only
Coast.
4 years of my life.
Yeah, how could I forget that? Running the Coast, 4 years. So, Jamie, I want to know, I mean, we've had the opportunity to work together on 2 films, and both of those were really fun for me. You're a fun person to work with, and you bring Todd, and Todd is also a fun person to work with. But we did Chasing Silver together, which is a tarpon movie in the Florida Keys. And then we did Location X, which is where you blindfolded me and wouldn't let me know where we were and fished with a masked guide in an unnamed location. And that was also super fun. I loved it. And both of those movies were very well received. But I'd love to know, I mean, even with us having worked together a number of times, I didn't fully get the whole story of how this started for you. Like, I know that you were in the advertising world, but it always kind of seemed strange to me that you were able to just take off so much time, because the way that you're filming your movies is far different than the way that we are filming our television show. You're taking a year and a half to do a 20-minute thing, or in the case of your new movie, 4 years of your life to put together a 4-part DVD series. In that time, I will have put together 4 full seasons for 3 different shows and had plenty of time to do other things. So how is it that you got into this, and how are you able to put so much time towards it?
Because I think I'd rather have your job. I'm definitely doing it the hard way, for sure. As I said, as we talked about before we even started on air, I said, given that I'm in the professional audio video business, this could still be your worst podcast for audio, but I wanted to check. Does it still sound okay?
Yeah, we're doing better now. And for everyone to know, this is an audio telephone conversation which we're recording, and I'm trying to embrace this technology more. I haven't been happy with the quality of the telephone interviews, but I'm starting to put my arms around it, and Jamie's a good guinea pig. I thought that he would have all this high-tech audio equipment, but it turns out he's doing it just like everybody else. But let us know if you hate this, and we won't do it anymore.
Yeah. If this is the podcast, for sure to tell us if you hate it. This would be the one. This is the time for people to start emailing you that this does not work for me at all.
That's right. Podcast at Saltwater Experience.
The Howard Films story has been a little different than yours. You know, this has all been a little bit of a flyer. It's been a bit of a wild gamble. I think I always say everyone has to have one thing in their life that they're willing to take risks and not be fearful. And that one thing, hopefully, is something that is an important part of your life. And I think for me, that was filmmaking. And so when I decided take this crazy journey not too far after 9/11. I was basically just taking some savings and got on a plane in an ice storm and went down to the Bahamas. It's sort of been catch can all the way through. In other words, there was no sponsor for that. That was on my downtime. That was after 9/11, and the agency was, for all intents and purposes, going to be shuttered for a little while. And basically, the first day, the camera guy wasn't even there because of an ice storm, and you're spending your own money. And I think, to answer your question, I think all these movies have been a bit of a risk. And even Chasing Silver, which is even playing in the IGFA Hall of Fame, was really, you can bleep this if you want, but it was really a shit show getting that made. I mean, you got you falling off the back of a boat, uh, taking out our audio the first couple of days. You've got, me uninsured with like, $90,000 cameras, because there was no smaller camera back then. And that was on my vacation. By that time I'd worked away to another advertising job. Before I was working at the biggest one in the world, but I decided I'm going to just put it all on black. And I was working at a smaller agency, and I just negotiated my vacation time. So I would do this on my vacation time. So that's what my vacations were. It was just, filming and editing at night when I came back. And so,
Wow.
When I'd see you guys, it didn't make a lot of sense how the heck we were doing this. Well, this was on my dime and just taking a risk each time. And fortunately, the DVDs, maybe it was the timing, the technology was right. It was a little bit before YouTube had completely taken over, and people appreciated premium content in the fishing arena. And that's why I decided to go into that arena, because I thought maybe I can do something different.
Mm-hmm.
There was a lot of traditional fishing shows. Bill Dance and the like were awesome. We all grew up with them. Jimmy Houston, and then Walker's Cay, of course, moved the bar, and they were shooting on 16. So I thought, if we could do something like that, but go just a little deeper with the film stuff, we could do something pretty cool. But it would require a hell of a lot of time, effort, and risk. And most of the time when I saw you, I didn't even know what day it was. But fortunately, you showed up and really, you embraced it. I always felt that people that embraced these projects did well. They can remain nameless, but there were a few folks who just were very incredulous about what the hell we were doing. A lot of places we went.
Yeah, I guess I can see that, because it was something totally new.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I always thought of it when you were telling me what you were doing. I always kind of thought of it as Warren Miller. That's what came to my mind at first.
Yeah.
Is like, this guy's trying to do like a Warren Miller film of fishing, and I love the Warren Miller films. I'm not even a big snow skier, but I just love those movies. I love how he does them. I love how they're kind of more casual. There's still production value to them, but it was kind of like he was just sitting there kind of doing the voiceover himself, and then he introduces the audience to these young players like Glenn Plake at the time, and he had this mohawk, and he was just this awesome skier, but he was definitely living to the beat of his own drum. And those films just captured people's imaginations, and they captured people's imaginations from the ski world, but also people like me, of just like, man, this is an amazing way to tell a story. And that's what I thought of. The first thing that I thought of when you were describing kind of what it is that you were after, and you sent me In Search of a Rising Tide, and Andy Smith didn't have a chartreuse mohawk, but but I kind of got the same feel. Like this is kind of Warren Millerish, like really, really cool. And I was sold right away before we had even met. I was like, if that's what you're trying to do, what's the worst thing that could happen? I mean, you're going to produce some kind of movie about tarpon fishing. It's probably going to be pretty good. So I was all in from the beginning. But let's wind it back a little bit, because this advertising agency that you were working for, you say it's the biggest one in the world. Was that in New York?
Yeah. Yeah.
All right.
That was in New York. Yeah.
You're in New York, and you've already mentioned that 9/11 was a big part of your decision to kind of step back and rethink things. Were you in New York on 9/11?
Well, I was not. My mother was. By that point, I had a decent apartment on the water. I'd figured out a way. I think you probably like me would not rather not be in New York City. So I figured out a way to kind of get around it by having, I looked out facing the Hudson. I'd worked my way to that point, but I had left as I often did. I can't remember where I was, maybe in Montauk. Actually, no, I was in Charlottesville, Virginia. I was at home and my mother was in my apartment, and because she loves New York. She was a kid there in Gramercy Park. And like most people, when it happened, I didn't believe it. And she had called me and said the building was smoking. And I told her, like a really good son, don't worry about it. No big deal. Don't worry about it. It just shows you how sort of what a great sixth sense I have for disasters. So she, like a great mother, as the first building went down, she put nice wet towels on my windows so no smoke would get in. She arranged all my stuff. And then she was trapped in the middle of a major disaster. You can actually see the Twin Towers from my apartment. So she could look out, took a couple of photos, still didn't quite understand the gravity of the situation. And then everything went black. As the building went down, she was enveloped in smoke and then went down the fire escape and was taken by a complete stranger. I think it was an African-American guy, took her by the hand and they went to a lifeboat on the Hudson and sort of made their way around and got over just before the next building collapsed. And so I was watching all this from afar, and it took me a while to really realize what was going on because I'd lost contact with her. But as I did, boy, that was scary and really surreal because you just can't wrap your head around it. You don't really believe the Pentagon's getting hit. You don't really believe that it was, a jet. And so, that was all part of the 9/11 experience for me. That was became a family experience. And I thought, that air quality is going to be so bad, which they didn't really want to talk about too much. And that's a slightly political thing. But long story short, I took my time coming back and sort of.
Were you able to make sure that your mom was safe, and then did she get out?
She went over to where they had everyone, I guess, on a base in New Jersey, and then she ended up having to make a decision, and she ended up taking a train somehow. I don't know how she got off it, and she went up to a childhood friend living up on 72nd Street, and just holed up there. And then she somehow, I think after 2 or 3 days, got a train out. And thank God. I mean, it was really scary from this end, not knowing when the phone went out. That was really scary because I knew how close I was to the building, and I literally had no idea. So there's a few hours there where you're just kind of hearts in your chest. And you really have no idea what's going on. And as the news unravels, you sort of get a clear picture of it. And that was again right before it was just a wash of social media. I mean, now
Right.
I've seen the entire plane flight from all angles. We knew exactly what's going on, but back then there was still a little bit of a confusion.
Yeah, and I would imagine that obviously you're living in New York, you've got an apartment there, you're entrenched in the whole city and that life. So not only, I mean, obviously your mother is who you're worried about the most, but you've got friends and people that you're working with, people that you've known for years also going through this, right?
Oh yeah, I have a number of people who were lost contact with, who had sort of sent me cryptic notes, cryptic messages about what they saw. Someone saw the jet fly over their head, and I'm like, "What jet?" And it was, it was very strange. I mean, on so many levels. I mean, there was shards of paper flying through the air for weeks. There was, pictures that I'd get from people of, half to a foot of, dust just outside their door. So I think it was a long period of recovery, but the city was amazing. Back when Giuliani had all his faculties, he was sort of co-piloting that, and I think it was amazing to see the city work 24 hours a day to do that, to pull it back. I went back and visited the site, and there's two big holes there with waterfalls, and then the Freedom Tower, I think they call it now.
Yeah, I've been
It's
there.
beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I've been there. It's a sobering experience. I mean, you go there, you kind of. I mean, when we went, I had my whole family up there. We're going to see Broadway shows. We're going out to nice restaurants, and then it comes to the day that we're going to go see that, and everybody's just kind of bebopping along, having a great time, and then, man, the just the weight of that whole place just sinks in when you go there. It
Yeah.
is. It was definitely the highlight of what we did in New York, and all everyone remembers it, and we just spent a lot of time there. I think we didn't plan anything else for the whole day, and we just planned on going there. And I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know what size of a museum it was, or what there would be. We spent a lot of time there, and the kids had a
Yeah.
lot of questions because my kids, Turner now is about to turn 21. Hayden is almost 19, and Hannah is 14. So wind that back to 9/11. They were little babies. I was out of touch that day. Also, just I mean, that was so long ago, and the world has really changed so much since then. Partly because of that, but also just because of technology and social media and everything else. Just like you were talking about, we talked on cell phones like you just talked on a regular phone. It was just like carrying a regular phone. There wasn't much texting. There wasn't much that time like there is today. Certainly no social media, and so you just get back into reality, and the world's changed. It was a very very strange time. I know a lot of people listening are our age, and really can remember exactly where they were and what they were doing, and probably every second of that day. Other people are younger, like my son's age, and they hear about 9/11, but they weren't adults at that time, and that was just such a day that changed so many people, and it had that effect on you, right? I mean, like, is that what you were telling me before, that you went through 9/11 and then took a bit to kind of step back and rethink your life?
Yeah, sorry, you'd broken up a little bit there, but I think I caught the tail end of that. But I think, yeah, there was definitely on many fronts a lot of big decisions to make after that, and so is decided to take a couple risks. I mean, the New York Ag game was enough of a risk, but this was a different kind of risk coming up,
Yeah. So, but the
and
but the ad agency, some of these decisions were made for you, right? You said that the ad agency kind of boarded up for a short time, or
yeah, it was a time where, we were sort of given the right to say, for physical and mental and also just business reasons, things were a little bit off the rails there. And then I decided to turn that into an extended leave of absence, and I went out to LA to edit it. So again, nothing by the book there, but I had a friend who was way overqualified to be editing my project. I think she was doing something for Oliver Stone, I think, at that point. So really absurd that I was going to bring her this all this tarpon footage, but she didn't know anything about fishing. So actually it sort of helped me because I could sort of guide her through it. But yeah, so it was just basically took a flying leap after that. And
and so getting back to how you decided on fishing. I mean, you probably got a lot of things in your life that you're interested in. How was it that you settled on fishing for this new project?
Well, I really think it was sort of a combination of a passion and practicality. I mean, I really thought I can get after this in a way because I've been doing it since I was so young that I could find some insights that other people might not have, or at least I was young and stupid enough to think so. But I thought I could do this in a way, and since it hadn't been really done to the extent that NFL had done with their films and other things, that I thought we could do it. So I just decided that this was going to be my way in. If I was going to be making films, I thought I would do it about fishing, and I would probably try. I thought there was a visual, there was such a cinematic thing about it. That's why I thought the Bahamas would be a great first place to go. I thought, how could you get away from that level of eye candy? And then if you combine a story with it, it's kind of like cheating. I can tell a story, but then people they're not really gonna be able to look away.
Mm-hmm.
And this, of course, was an SD. I mean, we were very proud of our technology at that point. We had our Canon camera, and it was pretty awesome, and everyone was really excited about it. But looking back, oh my gosh, yeah, it's not quite what it is today.
Man, there has been so much that has changed. So what year is this that you're starting on In Search of a Rising Tide?
I guess that was about 2001.
So in 2001, there was a pretty high barrier to entry for something like this. Like you say, the cameras were $100,000. It's hard.
Yeah.
It's hard to even fathom that. You could
Yeah.
spend $100,000 on a camera now, but you can also spend $5,000 on a camera now that would blow that camera away.
Hell, an iPhone.
Yeah, I mean, you're seriously, you could the quality of what you could do with an iPhone today is so much better than what that $100,000 camera was. I mean, we were filming on beta, like, you know, and I wouldn't even use that to hold the door open today.
Yeah.
But what
Chasing
else?
Silver was expensive cameras, but Rising Tide was not even that. Those were like Sony 900s and Chasing Silver. But I think in Rising Tide, we had whatever the fanciest SD camera was. I guess they were those little tapes. They're like little tapes. Yeah.
Yeah, it was pretty much a news rig, like what the guys use to shoot the news, and you know, they'd hop out of their truck and they have the camera that goes on the shoulder, and it's got a beta tape in it, and that's what we were using too. Now the funny thing is that the lenses haven't changed that much, but the certainly the camera technology has changed so much. You know, when I think about so much of that time, one of the things that happened in Chasing Silver, which really put that film on a much different level than anything else around, was a crazy idea that we discussed in the boat one day of
I know where you're going with this.
Wouldn't it be cool if we we could
Todd?
see, well, yeah, we might have ended up killing Todd, but wouldn't it be cool if we could see these fish migrating from the air? And then you're thinking, you know, maybe that's a good idea, but I don't have $5,000 to hire a helicopter for an hour.
Right.
And then we're thinking, well, it's hard to shoot out of an airplane. And I'm like, dude, I just did this last week. There used to be a ultralight with pontoons, and I used to hire that guy to go and look at the tarpon. It was an amazing experience, and dangerous as hell, but an amazing experience. And I remember we decided, you know what, Todd, what do you think? And he's like, yeah, I'm all about it. I'll do it. Which none of my camera guys on Saltwater Experience would go up in the ultralight. So I was like, cool, this guy says he'll do it. And so we went right to the airport and put him on that deal. Actually, it wasn't even on the airport. He took off in Key West Harbor and just went right down the ocean side, the Tower Flat, and all the way down to Boca Grande Channel. And that footage, I remember seeing that footage for the first time, and it was mind blowing because, and I look at it today, and it's, poor Todd was doing his best he could, but it's shaky. It's SD. You know, you're flying by these fish at 20 miles an hour. They're going 2 miles an hour, and you just zip right by them. But at the time, that was world changing. Don't you think?
Yeah, I mean, I remember that guy. I don't think he had shoes on. I think he was down there, and he was in shorts, amazing Key West tan, long hair. And I think actually the guy, it was Brian. I guess Todd didn't join us until the next shoot. Yeah, Brian, who was already, that's a story in itself. And I doubt he'll be listening to this podcast, so I think it's safe to say, but he had told me that he could do anything, dude. And he was like, bro, I got this. And he was like, you know, I scaled K2. I've shot in all conditions. And I can tell you that shooting Chasing Silver was, he said, the closest he's come to dying. He said the sunburn, the long days, the heat, the dehydration. You know, I gave him the warnings: wear long sleeves, wear a hat, wear SPF, pace yourself, drink liquids. He didn't. He just thought, no way, I'm way too tough for this, because he'd shot extreme movies for the Warren Miller, you know, type genres out west in Jackson Hole. So we put him up in that ultralight, and just said, try to get whatever you can. And the guy basically like put out his cigarette, flicked it over his shoulder, and said, "Let's go." And I saw Brian disappear over the horizon. And oh man.
We
But
also, we
he got
also,
some shots.
yeah, he
Some
got
great
shots,
shots.
and we also timed it to where I think we even got some shots of running the boat from the air.
We did. We got some great stuff. And at the time, as you said, now there's drones, and the level of perfection is just now is a price of entry. Guys in high school are shooting incredible openings on their drone. But what made this special was, like many things in the art world and life, when you do something first, it has significance. And thanks to you, we found a way to do it. And some of those long sweeping shots where you could see the fish down below, I think was a game changer. And it allowed, thank God, for us to come up with a way to really capture the magic of what the hell was going on. Because I think a lot of times in fishing, there had been such an emphasis in the past on just the catching.
Yeah.
The catching was the biggest deal. When the rod bent, that's when you were getting the audience happy. But we take a completely different approach, sort of the film approach is sort of, wait on that, build suspense, wait, show everything around it, show everything but the catch. And that was one of the keys to it. And so thank you. You're good. I should have given you a producer credit for pointing us towards that guy.
Well, that was more of a, man, I've been trying to get my camera guys to do this. Nobody's crazy enough. This guy says he can do it. So let's send him up there. I took a look at it again before we did this podcast, just to go back and see, some of the things that I thought were so cool the first time I saw it, and, would they stand up over time? And unfortunately, those particular shots, it would have been better just to have them archived in my memory, because, I mean, seriously, just like you say, kids in high school, my son has a Pelican case with a drone and a small Sony camera in there that has more technology than we had on our first 6-7 years of saltwater experience, and you had in your first 4 movies. It's simply incredible what's changed. I mean, we're talking about the technology changing between 9/11 and now, just with the texting and cell phones and social media and everything. I mean, the world has really, really changed, and so has distribution of content and everything. So what about that? What does that look like for you? I mean, at the beginning, in Search of a Rising Tide, you're selling DVDs.
Yeah.
And how are you distributing your content now, like this new movie that you have, which is all about the striped bass?
Well, it was, progression. The first one was DVDs, and then eventually it found its way to TV. And the second one was, again, my investment, and then TV found it, and then they wanted to invest in it. So we had kind of a, we could do DVD and television. Now, I would say both are gone. I would say the networks have become consolidated. I think they have a different business model. I think they're, so what we found for this last movie was a combination of DVD, because we still had a loyal group of people who really wanted that, the library, all the stuff we'd done in the past. Some people still watch Chasing Silver. We had kind of a lot of original music in that, and a lot of, things that you may not be able to see again, including your kids hiding in a rainstorm.
I forgot about that.
For the worm hatch.
I forgot about that.
That was crazy. Not to digress, but I remember, I've got to get a worm hatch in this film. And you said, all right, I got it. Let's go. And then with the blackest, darkest clouds I've ever seen in my life started rolling in. And I'm sure your wife
it's cool, man,
is probably questioning it.
I said, it's cool. We're only going to go about a half a mile away from here. It's fine. Once it starts going bad, we'll be right back. I don't want to be in the rain any more than you do. And you're like, okay, I got it. Okay.
Yeah.
You've been good so far. And I remember that, man. We went out there, and sure enough, the worms were doing their thing. The tarpon were there. It was all coming together. And then the wind started blowing literally 35 miles an hour as a storm approached. And Hayden was my helper that day.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, we can't go in. What are we going to do? We got to do this. Here's my I don't know how old he was at the time, probably 4, maybe.
Yeah, probably.
I don't know. And I'm like, here, just get in this stripping basket And so he was small enough. He was small enough just to get in the stripping basket and take shelter from the rain. And he was fine in there. I think he had a snack, and he was just eating his little snack in there.
Yeah.
Dad, what did he say? What was the iconic phrase that he kept saying?
Oh, you kept saying, is it, God, what did he say? Something about, is it because of the worms? And you're saying, yeah, it's
Why are we out here? Is it because of the
because of
worms?
the worms or something.
Yeah,
Why the
it's
tarpon
because
behaving
of
like
the
they were.
worms. Oh man, that's so funny. I haven't even thought about that
Oh
in
God.
years and years, but um, that's so funny because that's the time of the year it is
Yeah.
right now. We just had a
Chaos.
worm hatch.
Pure, utter chaos. I mean, we'll have to talk at some point about production. To be, you have to just know that chaos is coming. It's part of the deal. And so, you talked about distribution, but when you finally get to that distribution point, if you're trying to make a movie in the busted equipment, people behind the can't wanting us out of there. I mean, I think we were sort of blackballed. People attempted to blackball us in Almirada. It's a good memory,
That's
because
probably
they
not
didn't think.
not all that fond of a memory if you were getting blackballed out of Isla. I remember some tests, some problems that we had. We had issues with the weather, and I remember on a couple of days, either it was the rain at the worm hatch or just blowing harder. And finally, one day you call, okay, what are we doing tomorrow? I said everything looks good. I've got Fitz Coker on the bow, and we're going out of Key West, and we're going to get it tomorrow morning. It's going to be fantastic. But the crucial thing is we need to be at the dock at 10 to 5. And you're like, what? 10 to 5. And I'm like, yeah, we're going to get out there and we're going to let the sun come up around us, and you're going to get the most amazing shots you've ever seen. Okay, we're in, right? So we go, and I remember this so well because we had a similar camera that had a similar issue at the time, and it was this moisture issue, and we would have to be extremely careful about leaving the camera outside. So you've got this $100,000 camera that now you have to leave outside of your hotel room so that the moisture deal doesn't go off. This would lend itself to a great night's sleep. And so we go
Yeah.
out there, and sure enough, it is flat, calm, so flat and slick. And we pull into this area. It's totally black dark. And we start saying, okay, it's going to happen here. This is going to happen. I know it's going to happen. And we can just start to hear a fish roll in the distance, and then a fish rolling a little closer and a fish rolling closer. But it's that time of the morning where it's just so quiet, and the sun is so down that you can't even see them rolling. You just hear them. So you and your cameraman start getting everything ready. As the sun starts to come up, the moisture indicator will not let us shoot, and there are fish all around us. And somehow, by luck and the grace of God, the camera started working right at the moment that fish are rolling between the camera boat and our fishing boat, and Fitz Coker's on the bow ready to make the cast, makes the cast to a fish between the camera boat and the camera. It
Yeah.
was incredible, but it came so close to not happening because that was like the last second that the camera started working. That was totally
Oh, I
bizarre.
remember that. I remember the pain and the agony of just sitting there. Everyone's trying to remain as calm as they can while the sun was rising and we couldn't shoot it.
Yeah.
And and you just think, this can't be happening. Oh God, this can't be happening. And then you're watching the sunrise, and you can't record it. And then, as you said, again, by the grace of God, we got that shot. I asked you, I said, is that a pretty good shot? And you said, I don't think anyone ever got a shot like that before.
No. No,
And I said,
at the time
thank
that was
you.
just unbelievable. I mean, the
Yeah.
camera boats are 60 60 or 70 feet apart, and a fish rolls directly in between them. And that was kind of what I had thought, about going really early like that is let's don't go there and then just pull into them. Let's go there and sit and let the whole environment, kind of get used to us. And, I knew right where the fish were. So maybe I had landed right on top of them and, almost intentionally. And then given 30, 40 minutes, everything starts to kind of become a little bit more used to everything. And then they start rolling, and it rolled right between the two boats, and Fitz makes the perfect cast. I don't remember if he caught that fish or not, but it was just that shot of him making that perfect cast to that fish that just slowly just rolled. I had never seen anything like it before. And even today, that would be just an unbelievable shot to get.
I remember, I don't think we actually got that fish. We got one similar to it later, but I remember Fitz was always good for his reactions after a fish would leave town. He'd always have a good reaction. He'd always have a good quote, that sort of deep South summary of what had just happened. Oh, phooey. Or,
Yeah. Yeah, or many other things that he could say.
Yeah.
Fitz always entertained me with his humanizing of the fish, and
Right.
we would get there early in the morning, and he would see 4 or 5 fish rolling all together, very 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 slowly. And he's like, Tom,
That the poker?
yeah, he's Tom. They're in there playing poker, and we're gonna roll up in there, and we're gonna mess up their game. And he'd throw his fly right in the middle and catch the biggest one. Of course, he was definitely the best tarpon fisherman I ever had a chance to fish with. And what made him even better was his ability to put in human terms what we were seeing. And as a young guide that didn't fully understand what I was seeing, man, it sure did. That was huge for me. I mean, I'm like, okay. He's like, yep, they've been here all night long playing poker. They started when the sun went down. And I'm going to cast at the one with the biggest stack of chips. And I'm like, how do you know which one's got the biggest stack of chips? He's like, it's that one right there, Tom. Boom, and he'd catch it, and I'd be like, damn, that's incredible. But just the ability of him to tell these stories in the way that he told them was just it was amazing. But we've definitely reminisced about the fun of chasing silver, and that really was one of the most fun ones to me. We also got Rich on that one, and he and I went up there and fished in Long Key Bight with you, and that was super fun. Location X was super fun, but I want to hear about this new. Well, two things. I've never talked to you about Bass the movie, which you're fishing with a couple of people that I know well, regard extremely highly. One, Bill Dance, who has been a mentor to me and just an all-around awesome guy. So I want to know what it was like working with him. And was Shaw Grigsby also on that Bass the movie? Did you work with Shaw?
Shaw was not on it.
Yeah.
Most of our sort of big names were up front in the movie, and we wanted to sort of create a background to the movie before we went to California. And so we spent a lot of time with Bill, but it ended up being in the special features. He's in the movie, but the real candid stuff, we sort of get into, he passed on medical school and some of the things that happened in his young life and car accidents he'd seen. And, if you get him away from if you get him away from the TV he's got kind of a real Bill Dance personality, which you can't, it is impossible not to love it. I mean,
Right.
It's bigger than life. It's just amazing. But he's actually a down to earth guy as well. I mean, there's a person in there that's willing to just kind of, have a chat about anything. And really
anything, and also go on for a long time. Like, he's one of the busiest people that I know, but he's also one of the people that I know that would just sit and talk to you for however long. I mean, like if you get that time with him, he will just sit down. I did a podcast with him, and it's one of my favorite ones that I've done to date. And I like this hour and a half format because if it's just a 30-minute format, somebody like Bill Dance or so many of these people that I'm sitting down with, they have their kind of canned interview that
Right.
and they don't even know it, right? Like if you were to
Right.
ask Bill
Right.
Dance, Bill, what's your favorite thing about fishing? He's got, a response, which is a well thought out, honest response, but it's basically the same thing that he gave the radio station, and it's the same thing that he gave, whoever else just called him. And I find that this hour and a half format to 2 hours, the good stuff comes in the middle, right? And
Mm-hmm.
he did exactly that. He really loosened up and really told some stories, and he had some of his cameramen were there, and the people that he has had working with him. I mean, that was one of the things that I have a tremendous amount of respect for him is that everyone that works there has been working there for like 25 years to 40 years. He
Amazing.
treats his people really well. He's a great leader, and they stick around. But those cameramen, I asked him, I said, "Have you ever heard him tell that story?" He said, "No, I never heard that story." And I was like, "Okay, score.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's if these guys have never heard that story, then that's huge." And he told a story about, his favorite lure, and I don't know if that's one that I didn't actually get the story, the exact story that he had never heard, but there were stories that these guys had never heard, and I just thought, okay, that's great. But that none of that stuff happened before the 30-minute mark,
Right.
right?
Right.
And that's
Yeah.
probably what you did too, is just sit down with them long enough, and not just him, but anyone that is in the public eye, I think, or really just anybody. I mean, it takes a little while to, you sit down, you have a conversation
Mhm.
with somebody. All the good stuff's not going to come out in the first 5 minutes,
Yeah.
usually.
No. Yeah. You avoid and you try to avoid the cliche. Try to avoid things they've done before, just so you can kind of get their brain moving in a different direction.
Yeah,
And make it clear that you've got time to spare and they've got time to spare, and think good things happen.
right. When you work with him, you're also working with Kevin Van Dam, right?
Yeah.
Who else is in that movie?
Well, there's Mike Iaconelli was in it. I mean,
Uh-huh.
in terms of name brands and things like that, but the movie itself was built around guys that people might not know, and it's sort of in waters they might not know. And so that's where we sort of again went away from what you expect, and we went exploring. We went, sort of like went over to the reservoirs that are sort of, covered in wildflowers, and some really weird stuff happened. There was actually there was a closing. The lake was closed because of they didn't want any sort of these parasites to get into it. But we had one boat that was grandfathered in. We got on that boat, so we were entirely by ourselves on sort of one of the iconic lakes, just at the perfect water level. And there was a shad boil going off, and there was no one there. And it can get a little crowded in California. And we just had, I mean, if you talk to anybody who was on that shoot, they still laugh and giggle about it. And I think, it really became sort of going and exploring, and you really never ever know what's going to happen. And because we build in time, as you said, I'll shoot for a long time just to make, maybe an hour, and then we might shoot for days, weeks. So this happened to be one of those days where it just went our way. And what I found was the local guide there, his name was Mark Matrani, and he really had no idea what we were doing. Kind of like same with you, like what the hell are these guys doing? Because we don't really say much before we show up. We just show up with cameras. Our whole thing is we don't really spend a lot of time pre-interviewing, zero expectation. We just show up with cameras, and it caused a lot of confusion because I think his partner was very incredulous about what the hell we were doing there and why. And so his partner ended up spending the first day with us. And at the end, he said, "I have no idea what you guys are doing. I'm out of here. None of this makes any sense." Because I think people look at what I'm doing, and rightfully so, it doesn't make any sense. I mean, where's the sponsor? What is your time constraint? What are you getting out of this? What am I getting out of this? And it's always like, I have no idea. I'm just going to shoot until something cool happens, until it feels like a movie's in my hand. So we just took that approach, and whether it was talking to Bill, I just showed up, and he was very kind, and we just chatted. I mean, he's a hilarious guy. and super nice guy. Same thing with the other guys you mentioned, like Van Damme and Ike and Ellie. We just took those moments. And then we proceeded up to the Delta, which is truly magical. And it's got just miles and miles. You get lost there so easily. And they're sort of fighting a bunch of water issues up there, constantly fighting for agricultural rights, wants to drain it, for that giant breadbasket of the country. And the fishermen want it because it's a wonderland for migrating birds and animals and fish. And so we went up there and we shot it and we documented it with a guy named Bobby Barrack. I don't know if you ever heard of him, but he's a local and he is a wild man. I mean, he lives to bass fish. I mean, there's a story about him. One of the New York Jets was in a bar one time and he pushed up on Bobby, who actually used to be just a bagger at Safeway, before he decided that bass was going to be his life. And he said something to, I think it was a linebacker for the Jets, and he said something. He's like, "You got a problem?" He said to Bobby, and Bobby stood it. He looked at him for a second, and then he took his foot and he knocked the hat off the guy's head with his foot. And the guy was like, "Whoa, you know what, dude? We're good." And so that's the kind of powder keg I was dealing with up there. And I think if you see him fish, you'll see he's unbelievable. He only fishes with a frog. I mean, he's just that disciplined. He fishes some underwater stuff, but he sort of made his frog fishing famous. And he caught some absolutely huge fish with us. But like any movie, there had to be one thing that went wrong. And this time it was my fault. I can't remember if it ran out of film or batteries. So there I was with Bobby, and it was the hottest I've ever been on any shoot, including the Keys or the Bahamas. It was inland in California. It gets up over 105, 10. And I was sweating, and he was dipping and spitting and fishing constantly without barely even speaking until he found a fish. And he looked at me, he said, "You getting all this? You getting all this?" And the truth was I did not have, the camera was no longer working. And I did not tell him. And to this day, I don't think I've ever told anyone that I was not filming. And there was, for that half that day, I think Todd was back downloading cards, back at the car, getting the memory out, downloading them. And I had to fake it because I did not have the guts at that point in my career to tell Bobby Barrack that I actually did not have a way to film him at that moment. The camera was actually out of juice. So I put it on my shoulder and I looked at nothing until the boat finally came to a place where I could find and have him give me a new rig. So that was unbelievable. That really was. Fortunately, the movie still got made, but yeah, that's life.
Man, that's incredible.
Anyway.
That's so funny, though, that, I mean, just so many people ask about, the making of, how do you make a TV show or a movie? And you know what? There's so much to it that is not glamorous at all. I mean, it is just everything that can possibly go wrong goes wrong. But the crazy thing is that occasionally everything goes right. Like what you were talking about, you're the only boat there. This happens. Yeah. It's never happened since. Nobody's ever filmed it before. Yeah. And you're just there. And the chances of trying to plan that are zero. You're not going to get it. And you just happened to be there at the time. And that happens. And I would say that happens probably almost as frequently as when everything just goes wrong. Both cameras are down. The engine's broken. Yeah. You're sitting at the dock at 3:30. The mechanic's working on the motor. Basically lost day. But you decide, well, let's go for an hour. Once the motor gets fixed, and you see something that is so incredible that it's hard to even imagine, or that the camera starts working miraculously right before something amazing happens, or you're in the edit bay and you're looking at the footage and it's all out of focus until right at the second that the money shot happens, and there it is. Everything snaps to focus and it's perfect. Or the audio, something's going on with the audio, the cable's pinched, or there's all this, white noise going on, and then somehow just boom, it fixes itself, and then you get the most iconic piece of the film as far as audio goes. at that moment, as soon as it clears up. Like not even enough time to really edit it. It's like cut right to it. It's just amazing how that kind of stuff happens. And you try to explain that to people, and it happens so often that you even forget about some. I mean, like, well, while we're sitting here talking, I'm sure we've both remembered a couple of different things that were going wrong or something that was just amazing. But I don't know. I mean, there were that time with when your camera wasn't working and we were in one of the best tarpon situations I've ever seen. That was tough. But I'm sure that you've had others, and we haven't even begun to talk about this running the coast.
Yeah.
Running the Coast is a movie about the striped bass migration. And you had mentioned that you would like to do something kind of about it. And I have a friend who is a big striped bass fisherman, and he had actually put this thought in my head a while back saying, "Hey, look, this is super cool. What happens here is amazing. These fish migrate the coast, and once they're going from way down south to way up north, and I don't even know enough about the striped bass to know if they're going north or south, but one of the few fish that I haven't spent any time fishing for. So when your movie comes out, I'm super interested in it. And yours was going from north to south, right? It started north and then went south. Is that right?
Yeah, Chesapeake Bay to Maine and back. So from south to north, yeah.
Okay. So from south to north and goes through a tremendous amount of geographical differences. And then the striped bass just as a whole is an interesting fish. So had you always had your mind on maybe one day doing something about the striped bass? Because that's in your background, right?
Yeah, I mean, I had definitely sort of been exposed to it as a kid, out on the edge of Montauk. I think if you've ever been on the cliffs of Montauk, it's another thing. It just doesn't go out of your head. So it definitely made an indelible impression for sure. And I think as you referenced all the chaos that ensues and all the mayhem behind the scenes, you have to have a personality with a level of tolerance and patience. So I think this was something that was in the back of my mind that I just sort of patiently was waiting on. And I think a lot of people came into the striped bass game right after the moratorium because it's a fish it's subject to ups and downs. And I think the reason it became so exciting is there were so many that people were catching them in crazy
Now,
ways
wait,
because there
tell
were
tell
so
me about the
many.
moratorium. What
So
happened?
the moratorium was put into place in the I don't cannot remember the exact date. I'd have to look it up for you. But it was back, I'm trying to think whether it was 80s, 90s. It was probably 80. I can't remember what year in the 90s it ended. We probably have to edit that one in. But anyway, so it when it ended, there was a basically so many they had to put into place because the striped bass stock had dropped so far, and it was hugely controversial, and they had basically parking lot gunfights, people arguing with congressmen. I mean, it is really one of the most incendiary topics you can actually tackle as a angler or even as a politician to discuss, because if people fish for something for a living, they truly do not want to even talk about it.
Now, when they're fishing for it for a living, you're talking about commercial fishing and taking them, or like recreational guides.
Yeah, so both. So a lot of most of the time, commercial guys definitely don't want it. A lot of recreational guys don't want it, but mostly people who have any stake in it at all financially, they just really can't even sort of fathom it. And so
Can't
there's a
fathom not fishing for them. Is that what you're
yeah,
talking about?
and they think and they also feel like it's an invention by one side, that it's sort of like the global warming controversy. I mean, I think a lot of people feel like there's more than enough striped bass, but when the thing is when you actually go and you walk, you drive and you fish the entire migration, you get a very clear picture, and you realize it's not getting better. It's every single guide I talked to said it's not as good. And so I think there's some pockets where it's still rocking, but when people compare it to what it was,
Now, when
you
you're
know,
talking
in
about what it
in
was, what kind of years are you talking about?
yeah, I think it's basically been in decline since about 2006. So that's a long time. I mean, that's like 12 years of decline, with the peak being probably late 90s into the early 2000s.
Yeah.
And that's sort of like about 10 years after the moratorium. And
Yeah,
so,
I'm looking at this website. I pulled it up while you're there. Chesapeake Bay Field Office, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and it says under the Emergency Striped Bass Restoration Act, Congress designated the Fish and Wildlife Service as the lead federal agency to determine the cause of the fishery's decline. And it says that the decline of the Atlantic striped bass was so alarming that Congress enacted the Emergency Striped Bass Act in 1979, and they did a study to assess the stock, and then it went further to include a complete moratorium. It says in 1985, Maryland imposed a total moratorium on striped bass. Virginia followed by banning striped bass fishing in spawning areas. 4 years later, Virginia also imposed a total ban on striped bass fishing. However, fishery managers knew that harvest restrictions alone would not permanently restore the striped bass back to the bay. Interesting.
right. So that's why it was a little foggy for me, because each state kind of rolled it out a little bit differently at a little bit different time.
Yeah. And so then the
Happening then
then the
eventually
fishery
became a
the fishery
East Coast.
responds to that moratorium, and then there's tons around. Is that what you were saying? Because I really don't know much
Yeah.
about the striped bass.
So striped bass are sort of vulnerable because of the breeding stock. You know, they breed and they sort of in the Susquehanna and the Chesapeake Bay and the rivers and tributaries, and so they have to replenish themselves. And a lot of times, the breeding stock, which are the larger, the females, they're someone catches that, they don't want to put that back, and so those become ultimately trophies. But those have millions of eggs,
Mm-hmm.
and so the bigger they are, generally, the more eggs they have. Well, yeah, much more. And so, and the best eating ones actually are the smaller ones as well. So it's kind of a win-win to keep a smaller fish that's legal, but not the biggest ones, because they don't taste as good and they have all the breeding stock. And when you catch a striped bass, that's, say, oh, I don't know, a big one like a trophy, that's a 20-year-old fish.
Wow.
And so I think people get it, they take it home, but I mean, that fish has been dodging nets and anglers and party boats and whatever for a long time. So I couldn't help but just say respect that, send them back on their way. I mean, it
Mm-hmm.
wasn't really an issue with the tarpon stuff, because that's a catch and release fish, at least in North America.
So is that
But
a?
not it
I
isn't
mean, and
Silver Lake.
forgive my ignorance here, but the anglers and guides that you're following, were there some that wanted maybe that made the movie or didn't make the movie? Is there a culture of people that want to keep the striped bass even with the decline, or is that have they fully embraced catch and release, and all of the recreational guys are letting them go?
Everyone that I've fished with has embraced the catch and release philosophy. And it's interesting because Greg Myerson, who has the world record of an 82-pound striped bass, which is really sort of like, the King Kong catch of all time. He tells me he's caught him up to 100, but he would never have killed those.
Wow.
But he said that he would never kill another fish. And things get a little testy online. They tend to come after you a little bit, and so he was getting beat up a little bit for just him killing it while advocating catch and release. But at the time he did it, he wanted to show the world what an 82-pound striped bass looked like. Actually, he ended up winning on Shark Tank as well. He took which is
Hey,
his invention,
hold on.
and he put that into.
You broke up just a second there. He ended up winning what?
Have you ever seen that show?
Say it again. Shark Tank?
Yeah, Greg won the show Shark Tank.
Oh, cool.
Yeah,
Okay, so what did he win it
and
with?
he with his rattle sinker. That was the lure that he used to win or to catch the world record striper. And he actually out his back door because he said when he was cleaning up for at his old business, there was crack vials everywhere, and he saw the glass, and he saw the sound they made, and it occurred to him that he actually could use that sound to attract fish,
Yeah, I
and he won
remember
a
that. I remember
lot of
that from the movie.
fishing. Yeah, yeah. And so he took that same invention, and Mark Cuban from the Mavs said, I like that idea. And so they grouped up, and he's going to see what he can do to help Greg sell a little more of those rattle sinkers. But Greg is, absolutely catch and release. I don't think anybody we fished with in this movie had an issue with the catch and release ethic. I think it's just it's pushing up against people that weren't in it, more just the commercial folks. And we're sort of it's an ongoing battle because it's changing every year. People are adapting to a changing fishery. In other words, they go out, they're addicted to it like no fisherman I've ever seen. They get up at, in the middle of the night. I mean, we were fishing in Montauk. We were up at 3:30 in the morning. And then we had to, fish through the tide. And there was, really that level of passion and devotion. It comes from a fish that, rewards you for walking through the dark, getting out on a rock, pitching your lure into the rocks, into the surf. And so it's changed a little bit each year that he comes out. The fishing season's changed a little bit. Bill Wetzel, who I fished with out there, just an incredible guy, basically said he thinks it's probably time for a moratorium, which is kind of a bit of a shock to a lot of people.
Now, if they were to do a moratorium like that, would that include recreational catch and release fishing?
Yeah, I think it would be no catching at all. I think it would just be, they would just freeze it up. And so it's pretty controversial, as you can imagine, because it's so important to so many people. But striped bass have always suffered this way. They've always gone up and down. We shot this movie. We thought to ourselves, how are we going to do this? How are we going to make it different? We're going to be on the road for what I thought was 1 year. I thought, we'll do this in my spare time. We'll shoot it. And then at the end of the first season, someone said, well, why didn't you shoot here? And then I realized, oh my God, oh, well, I'll go back and do it. And then at the end of that season, someone said, why didn't you shoot there? And, my personality, I just like, oh God, I guess I got to do that. And so I would just figure out, I'll take more money out. I'll drive again. We'll go here. We'll go to Maine. We'll go to Jersey. We'll go to New York. We'll go to the Chesapeake. And then somebody said, well, why aren't you, is it just a boat movie? No. Okay. Well, why aren't you doing more from shore? So, okay, guys, we got to get back out there. And then, someone says, is this a fly fishing movie only? No. All right. So we got to make sure we got conventional. And then suddenly I realized we were considered shooting a 3-part series of every possible scenario, but then it had to be interesting. And the key was, if we were going to do all this, we had to shoot, for lack of a better word, phenomenons in each thing. In other words, a blitz, which is sort of a biblical thing to see off of Montauk, or sight fishing with a fly rod, or a worm hatch, in Rhode Island, or, go up to Maine and find them on white flats. And then I dug through the archives at the IGFA to find, films no one had seen in a generation and weave those in. And so it really became this sort of like, if I'm going to do this, I guess there's no going back. And so it kind of just became a blur, but there was no going back really at that point. Yeah. And so, as you said, you would have probably shot, God, how many episodes would you have shot? The time it took me to shoot my 2-hour movie.
A lot more than 2 hours. A lot more than 2 hours. But it's just a different project entirely. Well, the movie's incredible. One of the things that I'm almost embarrassed that I have no striped bass experience on the coast. We fish for them inshore or in freshwater, I should say. I've caught those fish, and they're, from what I understand, they're basically the same fish, just living in a lake or a river rather than out offshore or in the ocean. but I really just don't have. I mean, I'm only 49 years old, and I've spent a lot of time fishing for the fish that I have in my repertoire, tarpon, permit, bonefish, those type of fish. Just haven't had time to go and spend the time for the striped bass. But I'm intrigued by them because they're migratory fish. They're really cool. I've seen what they can do on rivers and in lakes, and that's incredible. They do some incredible surface strikes, and they're hard fighting fish, and they're beautiful. And I really like so many things about them, but I don't know much about fishing for them. But obviously, they are cool enough to elicit this response of complete obsession from, and that's what came through clearly in your movie, is that the people that are into this are into it to a degree that few other people are, despite the weather, despite the time of day, despite all kinds of adverse conditions that would keep people from going fishing in Florida. They're going. And one of the ones that I like the most are the people that just wear a wetsuit, just not even worried about anything else. It's like full immersion, and they're fishing the Van Staal reels, which are completely waterproof. That whole idea there just seems to be the most extreme of all the people that you interviewed, and of the different types of fishing. That seems to be the most physically extreme type. Is that right?
Well, I would say that the sort of the shore guys have a sort of a philosophy. I think it said, yeah, boats are for pussies. I think it was. I can't remember. I can't remember exactly how it goes. I think that's it. But basically, the idea is it's just two different worlds, and I think I was sort of faced with sort of bringing those two worlds together. I definitely faced some pushback from some people who did not want to, I don't know, help us out a little bit, maybe here and there, because they thought we were, quote, boat guys. And so it's sort of like every movie I encounter some kind of thing. And when you dig in deep enough into anything, you're going to suddenly get into an uncomfortable place. And I usually think that's probably a good thing because that usually ends up being good later.
Hmm.
But you've got to sort of keep going until someone's probably not happy. And then you know you're probably in a good space. And I don't do it on purpose, but I just know when you follow things, you tend to end up places. And so we sort of had to sort of say, look, we know that the shore guys are working their ass off. They're getting blown off of rocks. We've got footage of guys getting blown off of rocks. We got footage of them getting drowned by waves, getting up at all hours of the morning. And I think they consider themselves sort of the purest of the devotees of the sport. And I think they are. I mean, I think they are. No one's going to argue with the fact. I mean, Greg, who caught the world record on a boat, we had a bunch of scenes of him getting up in the middle of the night. They're hilarious. He's like, he can't even see straight. He's actually delirious. We were interviewing him in the middle of the night in Iraq, and I don't know if you saw that scene, but he's basically can't. He's just sort of talking stream of consciousness about, he needs coffee, he needs food, he doesn't know what he's doing, but he's not going to stop. I'm not going to stop. And then he wanders off into the moonlight. And I think, it's just two different things, but I don't think one's necessarily better than another. They can both be practiced in a way that's just as challenging. In other words, if you're sight fishing for a striped bass from a boat with a fly rod, you're facing a fish that just can see you, that doesn't want any part of you. It's really, really difficult. And I thought that was sort of the key of sort of bringing those two worlds together, is sort of showing how the most difficult side of each one, and then also having maybe a conventional guy try it and vice versa. And so, going back to the idea of why are people so into this fish, I think it's because it's the fish that shows up at your door. There's really no other fish that's willing to show up at your dock in Massachusetts and then also meet you in New York City, right below the Statue of Liberty, and then also pop up to a remote beach in Martha's Vineyard or Nantucket, and then find him outshore or offshore, miles and miles out. And so that's the only fish that really does that, and sort of that it's mesmerized so many people because everyone thinks they've got a shot at it, and they show up and they're have big, sort of interesting eye, and you get caught up in it, and you catch them as a kid, and you can't get away from them, and it gets in your blood. I think that's what happens. You start on the backyard dock, and the next thing you know, you're following them off on the boat, and those guys are following them to the edge of Montauk on the rocks, and it's an entire culture. I mean, guys live out of their trucks.
Yeah, no, I love it. I think it's really super cool, and I definitely need to experience it. I think I was even in touch with you earlier, saying that maybe for my 50th birthday, I might take my wife up to Martha's Vineyard or somewhere like that, and maybe try to get a couple of days of fishing in, just because it's something that I just haven't done. I don't know anything about. It's a very cool culture. I'm interested in anything that drives people to that kind of obsession.
Would it be weird if I joined you guys on your 50th?
I don't know. I'll ask my wife. I think she'd be okay with it.
Yeah. Okay. Just checking.
Yeah. Make sure you bring the cameras. We'll mic her up. And
Yeah.
no, I don't know if it would. I don't think that would be weird at all. That's just another camera going around while we're trying to do some family type project or vacation.
Yeah, I don't think it's a big deal.
No, I'll make sure to ask her. I'll have her call you if there's any problem.
I've been racking my brain here again about that moratorium, and I do think it was a late 80s deal. And so basically, I think the guys in the early 90s up until about maybe 2000 and call it 3. So maybe 93 to 2003 was probably the absolute peak of what caused these millions of people to lose their minds. And I think it's been slowly declining since then. And I think, to just reach back one more time to an old movie, when I was filming Chasing Silver with Tom Evans, I saw him. He's caught several world records, and he goes back to Homessa every year, and it's not anywhere close to what it was. He and Lefty and all those guys, Huff, those were the halcyon mythic days, and they just don't exist anymore. But yet Tom goes back there 20 plus days a year, hoping and praying maybe the past will come back, but it doesn't. He might not even cast more than a half a dozen times in 20 days, but that's how bad he wants that record, and that's how bad he wants things to be again. And I think that's sort of what fishing can do to a man.
Yeah.
You can see things and you're never the same. And I don't want that to happen to striped bass fishing, and I hope it doesn't.
Now, do you think that if a moratorium became something that was being discussed, that the recreational fishermen that you spent time with would be in favor of it, or they would fight it?
They would be in favor of it. I mean, it's kind of one of those things, like if you're a mature adult, sometimes things in life are not fun, and that you just have to do them. And so if people couldn't fish for 4 years, but I can tell you, it'd be really tough to do. I mean, there's been books written about it, how hard it was to do the first time. Almost didn't happen the first time. I'm guessing they'd have to go down probably another 40% before people are going to talk about it and even consider it.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Seems like maybe they could, instead of waiting for it to go down 40%, maybe just at spawning times of the year or something, just take a month off here or there, which might go a long way. But I don't know, all of these discussions of conservation, preservation of species, and eliminating or creating certain seasons, or all of those things. It's always interesting. I've been really interested in the wild hog situation that we have in the country right now, and there have been some really cool podcasts going on. One, Stephen Ranella did an outstanding one on his Meat Eater podcast that was all about. He had a guy that was in charge of wild hog extermination in Missouri, and he had a tremendous amount of information and research and all kinds of things to talk about. And one of the things that they had decided is that in order to eliminate the pig, that hunting was not enough, and they were going to have to actually stop hunting for a period of time. And that whole concept just got me really interested in listening to that podcast. And then when I did listen to it, it started making a lot more sense that they can trap these hogs and they need to kill them 100 at a time, not one at a time. And there are just not enough hunters to damage the population to the extermination level. And these pigs are mating so many times a year and can do it so quickly that they quickly have more babies than we can possibly kill. And so the idea was that they bring in these super trappers employed by the government or the state, and they create these giant traps, and they build them in a way that the pigs haven't seen before, the way in a way that the largest of the species can get into that pen. They don't close the trap until all of them are in there, and this guy's catching them 60 at a time, and that is becoming more effective. And they were, it was just this idea of maybe hunting, or maybe, in this situation, maybe catch and release is not enough. And if we really love this fish like we do, or we really want, you know, what's best for the land, that this is something that we need to consider, that maybe there are situations where hunting isn't enough. And I think that it's only with certain species, and probably with the striped bass, like one of the reasons why I would imagine, and I don't know this, maybe you can tell me, but one of the reasons why it declined, and I know this happened with red fishing. Well, I don't know what I'm talking about with striped bass, so let's just talk about redfish. The redfish became horribly endangered,
Yeah.
simply because it lends itself to fishing techniques that are far too effective. In other words, the redfish gets in a giant ball, thousands of fish in a ball on the surface that is easily spotted from an airplane. And an airplane can go up and say, there's a school right there, there's a school over there, there's a school right there, give the coordinates to a net boat. They go, and without even disturbing the fish, put a purse seine all the way around these things, pull the purse seine tight, and they catch every single one. There's zero that get away. And that is just a fishing technique that's just far too effective. And of course they're going to go extinct. That's what needs to happen with these hogs, because they're an introduced species that they're trying to make extinct. And in a lot of cases, hunters are maybe sitting outside of the traps and hunting the pigs as they're going into the traps, which makes the pigs super wary of that type of trap, and now they're not effective anymore. So that was one of the reasons. But I just find it an interesting kind of comparison: the hogs to the striped bass to the redfish to all of these different species that at one time have had issues, and luckily for us now, the for a lot of reasons, the redfish is back, and the redfish is back maybe in better numbers than ever before. And it seems like if you just give these species a chance, they will come back. But if the fishing technique that is being employed is too effective, like you're having thousands and thousands of striped bass go down a coastline, right? And if somebody puts a net there, they're catching them all. And I don't know if I mean, I don't know if they still do that, but at one point, I'm sure that's how they were being caught, right? And so the striped bass commercial guys are like really good at it, because that's a species that lends itself to that type of slaughter. Like, here's a path, we're all going down it, and if there happens to be a net here, we're all screwed. But I don't know if that's what's going on now. That certainly was what happened with the redfish. But that's a interesting kind of situation. And man, I would think that there's going to be some therapists that are going to get a lot of work if these guys that are so into it are not allowed to fish for 4 years.
You're right about that. Actually, you can thank Chef Paul Prudhomme for the redfish
Yeah, I
issue.
know. That's exactly. I mean, he created. It's not like Paul Prudhomme was out there setting nets, but Paul Prudhomme created a recipe for black and redfish, which was very popular, and rightly so. It was delicious.
Yeah,
But
so is
then,
striped bass.
yeah, and then you add to that the restaurants are like, oh, here's a top selling menu item. It's really easy to cook,
Yeah,
and we can charge a lot for it because Paul Prudhomme has written about this. Let's get some redfish in here. So basically, every restaurant that serves fish now has black and redfish, and stack on top of that the commercial fishermen are like, whoa, the price of redfish just went up. Let's go fish for those. Let's take our mackerel nets and put them around the redfish, or let's do whatever, or let's change our setup a little bit and we can fish for the redfish. And then you combine that with just the fact that particular method is just far too effective. So that's a recipe. That's a bad recipe. The one that loses is the redfish.
yeah,
That's a bad deal. And if there was something that said, okay, hook and line only, okay, you can still catch a lot of redfish out of one of those schools, but they go down and you don't see them anymore, and the airplane has to fly back over and spot the school for you again. That knocks down the catch 90%.
right. Right.
And so to me, it's all about the method. But if the stock has gotten down so far that no one can fish for them, that's certainly not a good situation.
Can't make any mistake about it. I mean, man can eliminate anything he wants. And so it's basically comes down to, do we wish to regulate ourselves, or do we leave it on an honor system, or do we just sort of honor that fact? And so we can eliminate whales. We can eliminate the striped bass. We can eliminate redfish. It's not very hard to,
Have you
with
tried to
today's
eliminate
technology,
coyotes?
target them. Huh?
Coyotes and pigs might be the exception to that argument.
Pigs are tough. You'd have to kind of. I know they shoot them with like AKs at a helicopter in Texas.
Yeah, but even that's not enough. I mean, that's
no.
You should listen to this podcast. It's really interesting because you would think that would be, that would be enough. But these things are just reproducing so fast, and they're in an environment where they're flourishing here in the United States, and they're just not really necessarily supposed to be there. So farmers are losing, tons of money, tons of crops. They want them gone. Hunters like hunting them because they're kind of fun to hunt, but it's almost there's a balance somewhere, and
that's the ideal scenario there. If you got too many of things, it's sort of like the deer. I mean, you don't have to feel any guilt about shooting a deer,
right.
They need to be culled.
They do, but the problem comes in, when does bow and arrow hunting or rifle hunting not enough, and the population is out of control. That was the point of this podcast that Stephen Ranella did.
Yeah.
Brought up a lot of interesting points, but I think a lot of those could be translated into the fishing. And we do have species that are like the hog and the coyote in the Asian carp, which are just absolutely take over these rivers, and they can't seem to get rid of them. I mean, they're not supposed to be there. Snakeheads is another one in Florida, and a lot of people like to fish for them. But
Yellowstone Lake, right?
Yeah,
lake trout in Yellowstone.
Oh my
Lake,
gosh,
right?
that's one that strikes home with me, because when I first went to Yellowstone, we could walk over Fishing Bridge and look down into the water at Fishing Bridge, and there would be thousands of cutthroat trout there. I mean,
man.
It was incredible. It was like a fish bowl. And then you go up into the river, and there's a cutthroat trout behind every rock. And I went there just a few years ago with my family, and I'm like, oh, this is the best place. Everybody's going to catch fish. It's going to be great. You know, it's so easy. And we get there, and I'm like, whoa, there's no fish here. Like, I heard it wasn't as good as it used to be, but like, there are no fish here, none. And that's the effect of the lake trout on that. And where that comes in is the Yellowstone cutthroat is a species that lives only there. There are many other types of cutthroat trout, but the Yellowstone cutthroat lives only there. So they are in horrible jeopardy. And how do you think those lake trout got into the lake?
Yeah.
Possibly by
Yeah.
well-meaning sportsmen that thought, "Wow, look at this big lake. We could catch a couple lake trout in here. You know, what's the harm of bringing one of these up from
Right. This will be
Jackson Lake?"
fun.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
then they get in there and they're like, these cutthroat are so easy to catch. I've never been. I haven't been hungry since I got here. This place is awesome.
Yeah.
And then I've got 20 wives. All I'm doing is eating and reproducing. It's so fun here. I love it.
Yeah.
Yellowstone is
Yeah.
great. But hopefully it won't come to the moratorium, and the striped bass fishermen will be in great shape because the species is in great shape. I certainly would like that because, man, I wouldn't want anybody telling me that we couldn't fish for tarpon or fish for bonefish or redfish or whatever. You
No.
just couldn't even fish for them. That would be kind of hard to swallow. But I don't know. We'll see.
You
We'll
know,
see where
it's
that
it's
goes.
it's a tough one, and I really hope that that things will change. It's been a steady decline for a decade. So what I'm hoping is if it could ever level off, I think people would consider that to be maybe the new normal, and that would be good enough. We may not get back to where it was after the moratorium, late 80s, early 90s, but at least we would level off. We just have to find a way to reverse that course because it's unlike the boars and the lake trout. This is not introduced species, and so it's vulnerable. And with any help, like I said, with me there on your anniversary or birthday or wherever, however we got to do it, I'll enjoy my time with you guys.
Yeah. Well, we should do it. I'd love to talk to you about another project. That'd be super cool. We've had a good time on the ones that we've done, and we just got to find something interesting that nobody's ever done
Mhm.
before.
Maybe fishing in space.
Yeah. Yeah, they got tons of fish up there.
That's something we haven't done.
Well, you know what? You're always talking about the story, right? The story
Yeah.
is way more important than the
Hmm.
catch. And if we go to space and fish, then you're going to have to be heavy on the story because there's going to be very little catching.
But think about how much water you can see at one shot. Like we could go up there and we could survey so much more water than we've ever done,
Yeah.
and just maybe drop right down into some remote spot at the end of it for the big ending, like Sandra Bullock at the end of what was that movie she did with George Clooney?
Whoa, I don't know.
I can't remember that, but
Sandra
that
Bullock and
Gravity.
George Oh, Gravity. Yeah, the
Yeah,
space one.
yeah, the old Sandra Bullock. She's had a lot of work done. I had to go with my girlfriend to see Ocean's 8, and that was she looked a little different in that one.
Really?
Been a lot of work on the gals in that one.
Huh. It's interesting. I wouldn't think that she doesn't lend herself to me. I
I
mean, she's
know.
always been kind of natural, like
Yeah.
supernatural, and not like supernatural, but she's very natural looking and not a lot of makeup, and it surprises me that she might have had work done, allegedly had
Yeah,
work
well, who
done.
knows? Maybe, I have to check out my websites, but it looked like a little Botox
Snope
with
it, Snopes it.
lip. Yeah.
Well, before we go down a rabbit hole
Yeah.
of Sandra Bullock and other people that have allegedly had work done, why don't you tell everybody how they can find all of your films and how they can watch them? Because unfortunately, we're probably going to have to bring this one to a close, but we will do it again.
Absolutely. So I think the easiest way to do it is just go to howardfilms.com. That way you don't have to search through Facebook or through Instagram. And that'll probably be a way to find us on all fronts. And I think there's trailers and hopefully something for that suits your viewing choice, whether it's DVD or streaming. And we've took the time this year to put everything on the streaming, which took a little while, but now I think it's pretty cool that we can actually now share things instantly.
And you can
And
access that right through the website?
yeah, you can do that. And we put stuff. The new movie is on Amazon and iTunes, and everything else streams just through our site. And the good news is everything you get is yours forever. It's not like it expires in 24 hours or 72 hours or a week or anything. It's once it's yours for good. And I think that's really good with the new movie since it's 3 parts. We've had, I'd say, maybe 70% binge watchers, but there's also a percentage that like to knock it off part by part who actually have lives. So, but I always tell people if you can get to part 3, it's kind of the denouement. It's everything, and I think it's sort of built that way. You sort of, all the vintage stuff in Montauk and all the craziness that happens. It was absolutely a crazy thing to have done, to have spent that much time shooting and editing, but it had to be done, and I'm glad because I've heard stories of people who've tried to do this, and it didn't end well, and I see why now because there's so much to shoot, it never ends. I could still be shooting, and but
how did you decide? How did you decide that it's time to close this out? Was there a moment where you're just like, okay, we got enough. This is it, and I've bled.
Friends and
I've bled
family
enough.
Didn't recognize me, didn't talk to me anymore. I think it was probably I was literally going. By the end, I was going out on my own because I usually shoot anyway on most of my shoots, and use more footage, use my camera as well. And this one, I was still shooting. But the crazy part is some of the best footage in the movie was from some of the latest shoots. So he definitely got rewarded for that. So I think the end, once we realized that we had covered the entire migration route with all disciplines, we called a close. I get a lot of emails saying, why didn't you shoot here? Why didn't you shoot here? And I just say, maybe it's a good thing, so the world won't be knocking on your door. Have you ever heard of a group called Ween?
No.
Yeah, there's the lead singer of Ween, I think, was drunk emailed me one night after watching the movie and said he was totally stoked. We got to go fishing. And then I emailed him the next morning because when I woke up and just said thanks, but I think it was done in some kind of post-concert haze because I never heard from him again. He must have seen it in a hotel room or something. And he's long gone. So anyway, yeah, I think he found it through the website, which was, again, howardfilms.com. And that's hopefully a few people can enjoy it. And if they have any questions, just email me. It's real super easy. Just info@howardfilms.com, and I'll answer any question, including ones from Tom.
All right, there you have it. There's a portal to Jamie Howard's brain. You can ask him any question, how he intends to fish from space, all the way back to how he chose to how he came up with the concept to go to a place that was going to remain nameless and fish with a guide that was going to remain faceless. And
Location X, that's the sequel. The next podcast we'll get into Location X, how that came to be, but you'll have to see it first.
Yeah, check it out. But I recommend that people, if you're into fishing and you're into storytelling, or you're into fishing or you're into storytelling, I like the movies. You should check them out.
And if you're into neither of those, you can do it too.
Yeah, you can find somebody to give them to.
Yeah.
but they're awesome. Jamie, thanks for your time today. I really enjoy catching up with you. I look forward to working with you again, and we'll do another podcast.
You bet, man. I look forward to seeing you and fishing with you soon, I hope.
All right. So that's Jamie Howard, Howard Films. Go check it out. howardfilms.com. Is that right, Jamie? howardfilms.com?
We have not changed the website yet. So we're going with that. Howardfilms.com.
Okay. Howardfilms.com. I'm looking at it right now. You can see all the different movies that are up there. He's got Running the Coast, In Search of a Rising Tide, Chasing Silver, Location X, Chasing Silver, Andy's Return, and Bass the Movie. They're all awesome, and you should definitely check them out. So until next time, we'll be coming at you with a brand new podcast next week, and look forward to it. Thank you to all of you for listening. This has been really fun. I love catching up with my old friends, and I love talking to new people and learning new things. So that's what this is all about. Thanks for going on this journey with us. I really appreciate it. If you have anything you want to ask me, or you have suggestions of people that we should talk to on the podcast, we have an email address, podcast@saltwaterexperience. Hit me up there. I read every one of those emails. And if you have time and you've enjoyed this, please go to iTunes and rate and review it. That makes a huge difference, and it gets the podcast out to so many more people. Share it on socials, always good. But again, thank you all for listening. I really appreciate it, and I look forward to next week. See you.
Thanks, Tom.
See you, Jamie.
Appreciate it. Jokes aside, I do appreciate you taking the time. Meant a lot to me.
Thanks, man. It's all good, man. See ya. Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for listening to the show. I hope you got something out of that. Got just a little bit of news. We have started a weekly show that is designed to be up-to-the-minute videos of what's happening this week, mostly in the Florida Keys, but also in other places that we fish as well. We'll be putting that out every week, and the best way to find that is to subscribe to the YouTube channel, YouTube/Saltwater Experience. Search Saltwater Experience on YouTube, subscribe to that channel, and you will get updates of when a new video is published. I've also figured out how to put the podcast on YouTube, finally. A lot of people like to put that window behind other things they're working on and listen to the podcast while they are working. So we now have that for you, and there is a playlist called Podcast. There's a playlist called Weekly Show. You can go and see all the new videos that we're putting up there. Started a new email address specifically for this show, and that is podcast@saltwaterexperience.com. podcast@saltwaterexperience.com. Those emails come directly to me. I'll see every single one of them. So if you have comments, suggestions, ways we can make the show better, and particularly if you have suggestions of someone you would like to see me sit down with in the hunting world, in the fishing world, in the outdoor sports world, or just a motivation, inspirational character, or someone that can teach us all something, I'm very interested in your suggestions. So that's podcast@saltwaterexperience.com. You can get the podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, SoundCloud, and we're also publishing it on the blog. The weekly show will be published on the blog too, but the best way is to go to YouTube, subscribe there, and you'll get it immediately when it's published. So until next week, thanks for listening, and we'll see you soon.